Hi, welcome back to the Bookwanderers Club. My name is Anna. I'm the author of the Pages & Co series, and I am here with episode 3 of the Bookwanderers Club, and I've got 3 more authors to talk to you about reading and writing and inspiration and all sorts of things. So first up, we have an interview with Benjamin Dean, who is the author of Me, My Dad and the End of the Rainbow. Now, I have a fancy proof copy here, but I will pop the finished copy up here so you can see what it looks like. So I chatted to Ben about his debut book, where he got his ideas from, how much of it was inspired by his own experiences, and how he found the voice to tell his debut novel in. Ben also sets a writing prompt for any aspiring writers out there, so make sure you watch to the end to see what writing challenge Ben sets for you. So welcome to the Bookwanderers Club, Ben. Thank you so much for being part of it, and congratulations.
Thank you so much. Just feels so insane that things are happening now. It feels like such a long build up, and then suddenly your book comes out, and very, very surreal, but I'm very happy.
Publishing it's like slow, very, very fast.
It's a lot of waiting around, a lot of waiting, and then suddenly everything happens all at once, and you're like, wait, what's happening?
Yeah, exactly. So to kick things off, could you just give us a little bit of an introduction to your book for people who haven't had a chance to read it yet?
Yeah, so Me, My Dad and the End of the Rainbow, which you can probably see behind me in my self-indulgent shrine up here, is all about 12-year-old Archie Albright. The story is told through his perspective. His parents have recently separated, they've just got a divorce, and they really aren't getting along. They really don't seem to like each other, and Archie wants to know why. He knows his parents are keeping a secret from him. He obviously doesn't know what that secret is, because otherwise there wouldn't be a book. And when he does find out what the secret is, he wants to know what he can do to try and make things better, which leads to a very badly planned adventure. I won't say anymore.
No spoilers, although there's a sequence on a train which I just felt so stressed reading it. There's a great chaos adventure. It's great. I heard that when you first started thinking about writing a book, you toyed with making it a book for teenagers, for slightly older readers. Mm-hmm. I would love to kind of hear about why you changed it to being a younger book and how you knew that that was the right way to do it.
Yeah, I originally didn't think it was the right way to do it. I was asked by my first agent at the time. She had seen the short story version of what the book is now, and she said the character at the time was called Charlie, and he was 17, and it was like older. And she just said, it's good, but I'm wondering if we could age it down. I think it'd be really interesting to look at this through like an almost teenager's eyes, so someone who's around 11 or 12. And I wasn't too sure. I'd never thought about writing for children before, which is kind of funny because my natural writing style, which is obviously Archie's voice, does lean into like that middle grade zone. So I tried like 3 chapters just because I didn't want to lose the opportunity of an agent approaching me. So I was like, okay, I'll try it and see if it works. And as soon as I looked at it, I was like, how did I think this book was anything else? Of course, it just made so much sense. And Alice, my first agent, was obviously right. And I'm so glad that I listened to her.
And you mentioned of like finding Archie's voice and that it's sort of like your natural writing voice. But I'd love to hear, so could you tell us a bit about Archie and sort of what sort of person he is and how you went about, I guess, well, finding that voice and tweaking if it's kind of, I think it's always interesting, kind of the natural voice that comes out and then how you have what happens kind of sort of intuitively and then you kind of shape it. And I'd love to hear about how you kind of found Archie's voice.
Archie's voice, although I just said that once I put pen to paper, I knew it was the right thing. Archie's voice wasn't actually something that came around until much, much later.
Okay.
I had the similar writing style, but it wasn't necessarily catered into his voice. I'd kind of just been writing it through my style, and things weren't. I was about maybe halfway through, and I was like, "This isn't very good." I was like, "I don't know what to do." So I ended up going back to the beginning, and in like a very bad sulk, I was like, right, okay, I'm going to start Hulk smashing my keyboard and see what happens. And the very first paragraph, which I'm going to read in a minute, is what I wrote that day. And I was very grumpy with myself. But when I read it back, I was like, oh, wait, this might work. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, Archie naturally came around just because his two best friends sit on opposite sides of like the spectrum. Like you've got Seb, who's like a warrior and is and will never break a rule in his life. And then you have Belle, who's an adventurer and like a free spirit, and she wants to go out and see the world. And Archie naturally sits in between them both. He probably leans more towards Seb, but he's a nice counterbalance for them both. So he's a good character to tell the story through. So I kind of, once I figured out who his best friends were, then it was easier for me to be like, oh, so this is who Archie is. And we went from there.
I love that's so interesting. I think like main characters are hard to get a handle on, and in my books, like Tilly was the last person that I feel like I had a really good handle on who she was. As you said, you're going to do a reading, and I think probably now would be, as we've just been talking about, now would probably be a really nice time to get a bit of a flavour of the book.
Of course, I'm going to read from the very, very, very beginning. I won't do the full chapter, I'll just do the first couple of pages. But yeah, here we go. The first chapter is called Some Secrets to Tell. So, you're standing in the bookshop reading this, right? Or maybe you've just unwrapped this book for your birthday in front of all of your friends, and you've quickly flicked to the first page to see what kind of story you're in for. Well, can you do me a favor before we get started? I need you to look over your shoulder. Your right shoulder or your left shoulder, it doesn't really matter which one, but I need you to look over one of them and double check that nobody is behind you. If there's one thing I know about people, it's that they are all very curious. And by that, I mean they don't know how to mind their own business. Okay, so the coast is clear? Good, because I'm about to tell you some of my most secret secrets, and I don't want just anybody reading them. But before I tell you my secrets, you have to promise not to tell anybody else. Not one single soul, I mean it. This has to stay between us, okay? Also, it's probably best that your parents don't know you're reading this book. I don't want them to think that I'm giving you any bad ideas. This book is a little adventure, sure, but I don't want you getting in any trouble. I'm Archie, by the way, Archie Albright. I would tell you my middle name, but I'm not sure I trust you that much just yet. Maybe later. Right, so the first secret. I'm actually 4 feet 7 inches tall. Yes, I told Amber Patel that I was 4 feet 9 inches tall, and yes, that was a lie. But I didn't think she'd be my friend if I said I was 4 feet 7 inches tall, because Caveman Kyle is exactly 5 feet tall, and everybody wants to be his friend. To be honest, I'm not quite sure why the first thing I ever said to Amber Patel was, hi, I'm 4 feet 9 inches tall, but I can't take it back now. Fortunately, my two best friends in the world, Seb and Belle, know my true height and don't hold it against me. In fact, they know all my secrets, even the ones I can barely admit to myself. The three of us have been best friends for a year now, since Belle joined our school from one up north, as Dad puts it. Before she came to Valegate High, it was just me and Seb blundering through life together. I'm glad there's three of us now. The second secret is pretty much why I'm telling you all of this in the first place. It's important to the story, but it makes me cringe to think about, even now. You see, my mum and dad kind of hate each other. They try to pretend that they don't when I'm in the room, but they're not very good at hiding it. Adults love to think that us kids are dumb, but half the time, we know way more than they give us credit for. Dun, dun, dun.
Such a good opening. Such a good opening. You had a lovely virtual launch the other night, and one of the things that you had mentioned during that was that people have asked you a lot about how much Archie's story is inspired by you, or in fact assuming sometimes that it is. And I think that's I mean, people are always interested, I think, in where stories come from, but I'd love to hear, well, I guess firstly, which bits are inspired by things you've experienced, and also, do you mind people asking you about that?
It doesn't really bother me too much. It's something that I found very interesting because the book is not based on my life at all. Right. But I'd never really assumed that some people might think that it was based in, at least in some parts, about my life. So I did find it interesting when people would ask did some of this happen to you or not? But yeah, I think most of my ideas come to me when I'm in bed. It's the only time I'm not thinking or concentrating on something else. And I'm trying to fall asleep, and then suddenly I'll get an idea and I roll over and I put it in my notes app and I roll back, and then in the morning I wake up and I'm like, what was that? Yeah. Sometimes there's something all right in there that I can work with. So sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But that's where most of my stories come from.
I do that a lot as well, and you know, you have that feeling. Sometimes you wake up and you've really like you've cracked something, and then sometimes you wake up and you're like, I'm not sure that was worth that's worth opening my phone for. Definitely a real mix of stuff. I think my notes on my phone would be, I think I would prefer someone to be able to like read my WhatsApps than to read the notes on my phone.
They never really make as much sense as you think they're going to.
Yeah. But every once in a while, there's something in there that
there's a little gem in there somewhere.
Yeah. So your cover and the inside illustrations are done by Sandhya Pradhat, and I was wondering about just what it was like kind of seeing characters and stories you've made up come to life. You can see on here, this is the gorgeous little slip cover. The proof came in, and look at that, like it's incredible illustration.
Yeah. I mean, I completely lucked out. I mean, Sandhya is an absolute wizard with her pen. She's absolutely fantastic. I'm not an illustrator in any way, shape, or form. Like a stick man would look terrible. So I remember being a little bit like apprehensive, waiting for the cover to come through, because I was like, if I don't like it, I don't know what I would say, because how am I going to give critiques, because I'm not an artist. But I had no problems whatsoever. As soon as it came through, it was perfect from the word go. But seeing some of those characters come to life for the first time, it's so strange. Like, obviously this is my first book, and this is the first time that anyone's ever illustrated characters that I've created and stories that I've written. And to see them come to life and be like, oh, that's who's been living in my head for however many months / years. That's such a strange and surreal feeling. Yeah. But yeah, I think I cried when I opened the email and I saw the cover for the first time. I was like, oh look, it's Archie Albright, who I've been living with for like 2 years in my head at this point. So very, very surreal, but I'm so lucky that I got to work with Sandhya on that.
Yeah, I loved during your virtual audio, you kept saying, I don't normally cry, but I think books, like having your first book published, having books published, I think if anything's gonna open those floodgates, I'm not surprised that it's having a book published. I cry all the time, constantly at book stuff.
I'm always like, I don't think I'm a crier. I'm definitely not a public crier. Like if I cry, it's going to be like on my own watching a movie or something. But yeah, I don't think I've cried as much over one thing since like this book came around, because like it's been a process that's happened, especially publication, like just over the last year or so. And so many different steps happen, and you're like, is this happening? Like, is this real? And it's always happy tears, it's never sad tears, but like happy crying is such a strange concept in general that I'm always like, why are you crying if you're happy for?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's been very emotional, but a lovely ride all the same.
So I don't think it's too much of a spoiler to say that a big chunk of the book takes place at London Pride. Is that? Oh, can we talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's always really funny, because there's like your two big plot points that you're like, do you tell people? But I think everybody at this point knows that Pride is the big inspiration.
And it's hard. Like, it is funny. So it's hard to like which are the spoilers that kind of ruin the story, but you have to have some things to talk about. Yeah, so first of all, I'm aware that sort of the people who have been watching the Bookwanderers Club, some of them are quite young. So could you just tell us a little bit about what Pride is and why, and then why it's special to you and why you wanted to make it part of the book?
Yeah, London Pride, which is what features in the book, is a big, colourful event that happens every year, usually when there's not a pandemic. But usually it happens every year, and it celebrates the LGBTQ+ community, and it is just a wonderful, wonderful day. I mean, it's usually like a whole weekend, but the big parade happens on like the Saturday usually, and they happen all around the world, not just in London. There's ones all up and down the country, but in America, Brazil, like everywhere. They're everywhere. And I love Pride so much. It's one of the first places that I ever felt like at home when I wasn't in my actual house. Just because, you know, I'm surrounded by other people who understand what it's like to be me, who understand my experiences and my perspectives. And it's so lovely. You do feel like you're kind of there with like chosen family, even though you don't necessarily know them all. Like the first time I arrived at Pride, and I can see thousands of people, and I'm like, you're all my family. I don't know you, but you're my family. But yeah, I wanted that to be a huge part of the book, because Pride for me and my community is something that we go to feel like ourselves, and like a place where we don't have to hide ourselves. And I thought it was a good like learning experience for Archie and Belle and Seb to be able to figure out a way to kind of make things better back home by just kind of understanding more and meeting more people. So there's a whole array of characters that you meet towards the end of the book and the second half of the book, all very colourful. And yeah, especially because I couldn't go last year because it was cancelled. It was very lovely to be able to write about it and pretend that I was there in some way. So that was lovely.
Yeah. The kind of gang of characters they meet at Pride and that form the kind of end, they're just such a good collection of characters. And I know, like, for people watching this who are gonna pick this book up, I can't recommend it highly enough. And it's just one of the most just joyful, uplifting, but also thoughtful books I've read in ages. And yeah, the finale, kind of the whole scenes at Pride are just brilliantly done. It made me yearn for just London and people. Yeah.
Same. I was writing, I think I wrote some of the scenes initially and then also edited them around about summer last year. So it was when London Pride would have been happening. And I was kind of looking at my manuscript like, I want to be there, but I'm going to have to live it through the page instead.
Yeah. And one of the things you've talked about as well is how important it was that readers have, is representation, and that there are books out there for Black readers, for readers who are part of the LGBTQ community or their families are. And I'd love for you to just talk a bit about why that was so important for you when you were writing your first book.
Yeah, like being younger, like when I was growing up and not being able to see myself in the pages of the books that I read, it is really difficult. You do feel a little bit alienated and a little bit alone. Like you can open a book and read about dogs that can talk and mice that can save the world and all of these other like fantastical, magical things that I loved reading about as a kid, but I could never find the most simple thing, which was just myself. And that's kind of sounds selfish, but it's also to be able to look into a book and see yourself represented and reflected back at you is so important for you to know about the world around you, but also that you're okay, you're fine. Like it's not, you're not weird or strange if you're different in any way. And when I sat down to write this book, it was important to me that I was representing me and also being able to give something to kids who were like me when I was younger, and hopefully will have much more representation and be able to see themselves in many places, because I know me and people my age and older didn't really get that chance. And it does have an effect on you because you grow up thinking other people aren't like me and I'm alone. So it's always good for kids to be able to look at them, look in books and look on the screen at movies and TV shows and look in magazines and newspapers and be able to see themselves and know that, oh, look, there's me. I know that there are other people out there who are also like me and it will all be okay. I wish someone could have told me it would all be okay when I was like 12.
Yeah, that's amazing. And this is an annoying question. I know it's always better when I'm interviewing authors, I'm always asking people questions that I find annoying when people ask me, so sorry, but can you tell us anything about what you're working on next?
Oh, of course, yeah. It's not a sequel. People always want to ask if it's a sequel. I'm not writing a sequel to End of the Rainbow. They do share a lot of similar themes, and trying to figure out what I should say and what I shouldn't.
Really hard to
my publicist will be watching like, what is he going to say?
Yeah.
This book is based on two sisters. I'm not going to say what happens to them, okay. But it will be just as colourful and just as bright and adventurous as End of the Rainbow was. And I will be taking one of the characters from End of the Rainbow into book 2 because they kind of were one of my favourites but didn't get as much page time as I kind of wanted them to be able to have. So I want to be able to kind of drag them into book 2 and see if we can expand on their story a little more there.
That's exciting.
Yeah, it's nice to be able to link the books together in some way, but they are two separate books. So it'd be nice to link them that way.
Yeah, I love that. I really like kind of books that aren't like official series, but there's the kind of linked characters and things
Yeah,
coming through. Um,
hopefully there'll be some nice references to book one, so hopefully it'll be nice.
yeah, amazing. My last question, which again I'm putting you on the spot a little bit, but we just talked about kind of we're talking about books and representation and all that. Are there any books that you've kind of enjoyed either when you were a child or more recently that you would recommend to readers who've enjoyed reading Me, My Dad, and the End of the Rainbow?
I would say Sarah Hagger Holt has Proud of Me just came out. We actually shared the same publication day, which was great. It's lovely to be able to know that you've got friends that you kind of publish a book next to, because you don't have to do it on your own. But yeah, Sarah's writing is fantastic and her storytelling is incredible. And if you're in any way interested in End of the Rainbow, you will definitely be interested in Proud of Me. And I think her first book's called Nothing Ever Happens Here. So those two I would definitely recommend.
Awesome. So for anyone who's been inspired by listening to Ben talk about where he got his inspiration from in his book, Ben has got a little writing prompt for you. So Ben, what have you gone for?
So inspired by my book, which you can obviously tell as we've seen that it's very colourful, you know, it's got the lovely inside cover, which is very, very colourful. So my writing prompt is really, really, really simple, but I want you to write a story that includes a lot of colour. The colour can come in any form you like, but I want to see as much colour as you can get into that little story of yours, and just see what kind of amazing, magical things you can come up with.
I love that. I love that lots of different directions that you could go in there.
Yeah.
And if you do some writing inspired by Ben's prompt, I would love to see it. There is an email address, I'll pop it in the description box, but it's the bookwanderersclub@gmail.com. So if you do some writing, I would love to see it. Well, thank you so much for being part of the Book Wanderers Club. Ben's absolutely wonderful book is out now, so you can find it wherever you are getting books from during the pandemic. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Next up, we have Big Questions with Liz Pichon, who's the author of the Tom Gates series, which is actually celebrating 10 years this year, and the Shoe Wars series. So Liz has answered some questions from the Sydney Stringer Academy. Thank you very much for being part of the Book Wanderers Club, all about writing and reading. And she also shares the original notebook where she started planning the first ever Tom Gates book. So we talk about 10 years of Tom Gates, the new book of stories she's written to celebrate that anniversary, and all sorts of other things. So, welcome, Liz. Thank you so much for coming and being part of the Book Wanderers Club.
Thanks for asking me. I'm delighted to be here. You see, I've made an effort.
Yes, you're putting everyone else to shame, I think, with that background. So Liz is taking part in our big questions. So in a moment, I have got 10 questions from the Sydney Stringer Academy from year 5 and 7 who've sent some questions in. But before we get to their questions, we are going to just have a little bit of a chat, because it's a big occasion at the moment, because it is 10 years of Tom Gates. So
no, we're making it last like the whole year as well.
I think that's absolutely, if it's a 10-year anniversary, you've got to make the most of it. So congratulations, happy anniversary, 10 years. How does it feel to be 10 years in, celebrating 10 years?
Honestly, we're talking about this over. Honestly, it's gone in a flash. It really has. It's gone in a real flash. I can't believe that I've written, this is the new book that's out in February, but I can't believe this is book 18, Anna. 18. If you told me that I was going to be writing 18 books right at the very beginning, I literally wouldn't have believed you. So actually this time I've had the chance to go back and read some of the books. I've read a little chapter for Scholastic that we're going to put out, and it was really nice actually going back and looking over. Just you know, I've forgotten some bits. I mean, and actually the kids who read the books, they probably know them better than I do, because I tend to, once I've done a book, I tend to, you know, everything that's in there goes, and I'm already thinking to the next one. So yeah, it's gone in a flash. I feel like an old fossil now.
And I want to ask you more about the new book, but I know that you have, thinking of the very beginning, you have something to show us a little, which I think is amazing to have.
Well, I think it might be one of the questions, so I don't want to preempt it, but one of the things that people always ask is, how do you start? Where do you get your ideas from? And, keeping a diary is a really good way of, doing regular bits of writing. But I actually wrote the first bit of Tom Gates in an exercise book because I was imagining that Tom was in his class. Here, I'll move forward. So I was imagining that Tom was in his class and he was actually writing and drawing, doing doodles and, as you do in an exercise book. And I had, let me see if I get to it. So Mr. Fullerman would write in. So Miss Fullerman would be different font. So the teacher would write in different things. And I was trying to use the pages. I was trying to use the pages of the book, like I thought, like I would have done when I was a kid, how like writing, drawing doodles. So that was Zombie Dogs logo there. The Bad Bunny. That was the Foot Fighters. That was great. But and then I changed it to Dog Zombies because I realised that an actual band exists called Zombie Dogs, so I had to change it. So that was him, Mr. Fullerman writing poems. And then I wrote. So I imagined that Tom was writing about his holiday, and that was his first bit called Camping Sucks, about a terrible holiday. And it enabled me to do things like if Tom had forgotten his homework, or he wanted to make an excuse, so he chucks water over it like that, pretend. And actually lots of the stuff that I did in here has actually ended up in the book. And this is my the last bit here. This is another one of Tom's excuse. That was the dog got my homework. So yeah, so it's just it's just a nice way of starting something off. It's like a notebook really. So that's what I did, and then I sort of photocopied it and just turned it into this, and this is what got sent out to the publishers for the first Tom Gates books.
Amazing.
Yeah, actually how I make the books now is just a A4 piece of paper folded in half, and then I sort of handwrite and draw on them. And so it's not, then I scan it into the computer and move it around and everything. But that's how I start off. So I thought it might be nice to share that.
It's amazing. It's amazing to see. And of course, you've given us you've held it up, but to celebrate the 10-year anniversary, we've got 10 tremendous tales. So could you tell us what's inside there and what readers will find in there?
Well, this one is a series of different stories. So it hasn't got one story. I thought it would be fun actually because it's 10, we thought doing 10 different stories. So it's, lots of Tom gets stuck in a lift with Delia. That's one of the stories. Oakfield School are having a school parade. That doesn't bode well. There's lots of the usual things. Oh, there's celebrity sightings in this. So we've got, I think it's eight celebrity sightings, or maybe not. I was just trying to think of different things that would happen in the little leafy green in the Oakfield Town School. Bits of poetry, there's a bit more music. How to make a bug. So I've got a nice bit of how to make a bug. I've got a silly game there, so I've drawn lots of ants in pants. And a poem. Actually, I was very proud of my poem, which I can read to you.
Yeah.
This is like, the ants wore tiny pants. Then they found, when they ran around, their pants were not tiny enough. Basically, they are. Their pants are all thin.
Absolutely.
So this is the kind of classic stuff that you're all going to be in. This is what 10 years of writing gets you. And also, which I'm not allowed to show you yet because it hasn't been announced, but we ran a competition. Lots of the children did drawings and designed like Tom Gates covers. And so all the winner is in here and all the runners up. So we printed them.
Amazing.
So
okay,
I'm not allowed to show you. But yeah, so there's lots, that's what's in here. Lots of things, lots of fun things.
Very exciting.
Yeah, so one of the things that I did when I first started doing events, I don't know how you feel, Anna, but I was writing and illustrating books, and then suddenly you have to start talking about them, and and you do smaller audiences, and then you get bigger audiences talking to whole assemblies. And one of the things I started to do was I started drawing on my shoes. For the only purpose was that all the kids were sitting on the floor.
Yeah.
And I thought it'd be fun for them to spot a character if I drew. I mean, the shoes were like a £10 pair of shoes. and I just drew on them with a Sharpie. And then it became a thing where I'd be looking out for shoes that I could draw on. And I love the fact as well that the Tom Gates books are filled with lots of creative things, and the way that children enjoy copying the drawings. And I always put things how to make in at the back of the books as well. So I loved being able to show kids how you get an idea for a story, you make a book, but then you can use those drawings and put them on things as well. So here's one of the shoes that I did. That was for I can't remember which book that was. That was the world record disco dancer. So that was one of the events that we did where all these kids, we actually broke the world record. We don't hold it anymore, sadly, but we did break the world record for the largest disco dance with the school.
That's amazing.
It's fun, yeah. So this sort of designs, it's really fun just to be able to put them on lots of different things. And
yeah.
Choose.
And Tom Gates he has escaped the bounds of just the pages, because he now exists on screens as well. And you have the Tom Gates TV show, which must be is it exciting, weird? You've been super involved with it, I know. So
it's been like a really interesting process of how to take the stories and what it was going to look like. We've kept the same feeling of the characters, or black and white, the drawing, the hand drawn, but it's making his world bigger, which is really exciting, and being able to see things that you can't do in the books, which has been really great to do as well. We've had a lot of fun with the monsters and the bugs. But the TV, it's called The Brilliant World of Tom Gates. But the show is great because it's exactly the kind of thing that I would have loved to have watched when I was a kid. It has all the things in it that I love as well, which is then music. So we've written songs for the show. It's got, how to make things. I'm doing bits of drawing. So I'm showing you simple things, flip books, how to do Tom Gates doodles, drawing on shoes. It's got all that kind of thing in. So, I loved all those sort of programs when I was a kid. Things like Vision On, and I used to watch a program called The Banana Splits. You're too young for that. You won't remember. But they were all programs that had lots of little things in them.
Right.
Yeah. The feedback we're getting now is that people are really enjoying it. So, and I hope it's fun.
Yeah. Right. So I think it's time for some big questions.
Okay. Question.
Are almost all about writing and reading, although they are it's year 5 and 7 from Sydney Stringer Academy, and they've been given free rein to ask whatever they would like. So the first question is actually a really nice one, considering it's the anniversary. So this is 2 people wanted to know this. So this is Shruti and Bailey Ray, both asked, which is your favourite book that you've written and why?
Do it's always the one I'm working on at the moment. It always is. So as soon as I finish the book, it's gone. And I start thinking about the next book. And that's always my favorite process of the book, is when you've got the ideas and you're just formulating things and you can just do what you want and you don't know where it's going. That's always the good bit. And then you have to look at the deadline and and you have to figure out. So my favorite book is always the one I'm working on at this moment. But I suppose if I had to pick one, it would probably have to be the Brilliant World of Tom Gates. I'm very fond of Genius Ideas as well.
Okay.
That's got a flip book in the corner, and I love that. I know the kids love that as well. So good questions, though.
This is a very interesting question. Eliana asks, what type of person would you describe yourself as?
Disorganized at the moment. I don't know, I'm generally quite positive. I'm just thinking about
you can't describe yourself.
I think I'm very much like Tom is in the books, generally enthusiastic about things but gets easily distracted. I think
that's a good answer. I like that. Jaden asks, what job did you have before writing?
Well, I started off as a graphic designer, so I wasn't a very good graphic designer. Attention to detail, I meet graphic designers that have that real kind of finicky, and I was always a bit like so the first job I ever had was designing. I used to work for a record company, So I used to design album covers and all that posters and things. And so I worked but I always loved illustration. So anytime I got the opportunity to do a bit of drawing or illustration, I would do a job and actually use illustration to it. And then, so I kind of got the confidence to say, okay, I'm an illustrator now. And so that's what I did. I worked as an illustrator. So I used to get my designs on as many different products as possible. So when I was freelance, I worked with greeting cards, calendars, fabric, towels. I had my own little t-shirt company. So I used to put designs on t-shirts and sell them in markets and things like that. So I did lots of that. And then some of the greeting cards that I did, interestingly, quite a few illustrators quite often work in greeting cards or have done them in the past, because it's really good for characters,
right?
Good for character development and sort of humor. And so I know quite a few people that's worked in greeting cards that do books now. And then gradually publishers started to see my characters, and then they started to ask me to do illustrations for other people's books. So I started off doing baby board books, doing things like that. And then that's when I got the confidence to start writing my own books and picture books. So that's a really long way of answering your question.
That's such an interesting, I find it fascinating how people have kind of ended up being writers and illustrators. Yasin, so it's interesting you touched on that you're a little bit like Tom, but because Yasin asks, would you want to be the protagonist in your book?
Well, there are lots of things about Tom and his character that I have based on my own childhood, things that he does and that he did, things like the caramel wafers. Like when I put them in the books, I never knew they were going to be a thing, like taken off. So yeah, I feel like there is a little bit of me as a protagonist. There's little bits of characters, all the different characters have a little bit of. I sometimes look at Delia as well with her glasses and things, and I quite often look like that. That sort of grumpy, dry sense of humor is definitely me.
Yeah. Okay, bear with this question. So Atara asks, if you had someone ask, have you ever thought of doing this? What would you not consider doing?
Skydiving.
Oh, okay.
Anything to do with heights.
Okay.
Yeah. Is that what she meant? Is that the kind of thing
that absolutely is what she meant? Yes. Yeah.
Potholing.
Okay.
You're not going to get me down a pothole or up jumping out of anything like that. Yeah. I'm just like, yeah, I find life scary enough. I don't need to add to the extra.
I am with you on that. Potholing is honestly one of the most horrifying things I can imagine doing, and I can't believe it's fun.
I had a conversation with Catherine Rundle, who's, like she goes, if she writes a book on the Amazon or something, like she's there.
Yeah.
She can fly a plane, I think.
Yeah.
And she does sort of
she can do all sorts of things.
I know, and I'm a huge admirer of that, and I think, wow, that's incredible, and it's just not going to be me.
Yep, I'm with you. Yeah. Sometimes when Catherine's telling me about the things that she does, I'm just like, I'm amazed, but yes, very happy to leave it to her. Yeah.
Well done. I'll just take a sip of my drink.
Bryson, this is a note. Bryson asks, how is your life as an author at the moment?
It's like for everybody, it's changed. I mean, there are some aspects of it that haven't changed. And actually, if you're a writer, you're quite used to sort of isolation a lot of the time, and having to learn to, to take yourself away. And that's the only way I can actually write. Mm-hmm. I can't have, music on. So you're used to sort of being in your own mind and for long. So actually, that part of being stuck inside is, but the other side of it, which is really not, which I haven't enjoyed, is just not being able to go out and do the book events, not being able to meet people, not having that contact of when you're discussing things. There are some things that, everyone's got used to doing meetings like this, but it's just not quite the same. I mean, the only thing that's trying to think of positive things about it is actually when I first started doing Zoom visits or visits to schools on Skype. Mm-hmm. It was always really hit and miss, and it depended on. But now I think schools are like that, and so I think actually in the future, you know, there will be, it's great because actually people will be able to go and do Skype visits and things because the schools will be much more on it, and we've all kind of got used to doing that. But yeah, I haven't enjoyed that aspect of it though as much, like anyone really. But I do feel incredibly fortunate to be able to carry on doing my job, and just be able to get on with things and do lots of, you know, like try and get things. You know, there's lots of people that can't carry on working, but we've been lucky enough to do that. So
yeah.
So that's how it's changed.
Andrea asks, how does any author come up with ideas for a whole book rather than a general idea? Which is the thing, Andrea. It's a good question. And
you know what? I mean, actually, I've got a few things here. Well, one of the things that I do initially when I'm doing a book, hastily, I thought I had a book one here. I've got this thing that I do for that I've done for the TV shows, but actually I do them for the books as well. So I do little story maps.
yeah.
So they might all together, it looks a bit daunting, but actually they're just very small individual ideas, and I just write down. I mean, you could almost use like sticky notes or something. So I write things down that very simple things like Tom goes to the hairdressers, dentist. You could do like Tom goes to the supermarket. So you'll just write down things that happen, and then you just ask yourself questions about it, like what if? So Tom goes to the hairdressers. So you kind of go like, well, okay, what if he has to go to the hairdressers with his granny, and you know he's sharing in the window with something, you know, like having his hair cut with it. He's got one of those clips in his hair. And then what if, you know, of course, Marcus will walk past and see him. And like Tom's in there trying to hide. And so you just start off with very sort of simple ideas like that. You know, what if he's going to go shoe shopping? What if he forgets his homework? You know, so I start off a book by just not thinking about the whole thing at all, by just writing individual little things down on a piece of paper. And I don't work in a sketchbook. I tend to work on a layout pad, which is very thin paper. There's something for me personally about putting things in a book. It always feels very precious. So I tend to write on like really scrappy bits of paper. And so it doesn't matter. And I don't have to show them to anybody. I don't have to do anything. I literally just go.
Yeah.
And then when something hits, or you know, and I keep notes as well. I take photographs of things. If I hear stories, or I think of something's funny, like I hear something in the news, or I'm listening to the radio and so somebody says something funny, I write it down. So I'm collecting things all the time, and then slowly it starts to form a story. So that's how I do it. Yeah, you just collect things, and then at some point something might trigger something off. And the thing to do is not. In fact, I just found it just now. So when I got my book deal, like I had to come up with 3 books, and I'd never written anything more than a picture book. So I literally just did this. I mean, again, it looks very fancy, but it isn't really. So this is book 1. So book 1, Tom Gates World, September. So what I did was I divided it up into months. So I had September, October, November, December. And then I just started to write down different things that would happen in those months. So I went back to school, Amy sitting next to me, new class layout, homework, you know, just like little individual things like that. And I did that for all 3 books. You know, I just, you get like a collection of things. And then when you start to draw the characters, and then you start thinking, not everything made it in there. So I've written, you know, I put Halloween. I've never done a Halloween thing, like homework excuses, sleep over at Derek's, you know, individual school photo, try and impress. So the school photo ended up being in the book, but you can see how if you just write things down like that, then it can trigger things off. And the thing is just to get it out of your head and onto a piece of paper. Yeah. And actually most of the story writing is when you start moving things around and editing it. It's never right the first time. Yeah, so don't worry about it. And the thing is, the more you write and the more you write about and don't worry about it, that's when things start to come together. It's just more important to do something. Nothing's going to happen if you do nothing.
Right, Mohammed would like to know, what's the worst bit of being an author?
Oh, without doubt, deadlines. Deadlines, like relentless deadlines, I think. I mean, compared to people that work in magazines, we have years, because, you know, if you're doing magazines or newspapers, they have to work much quicker. But I think it's the deadlines. Yeah, they just seem to creep up very quickly, and I never feel like I have enough time. And then when you press that button for the book to go, it always feels like, oh, there's always something in there that you would want to do better, that you would want to change. So yeah, I think that's the worst thing. It never gets any better either.
That would be my answer too. Deadlines. Yeah. Susanna asked, if you were to write a book based on your life, what genre would it be?
I think I'm doing it.
Yeah.
I think literally I am doing a book based on my life, because it is all the things that I loved doing when I was a kid. Like literally, you know, reading funny books, drawing, making things, all the stuff that Tom does. Is lots of it, I said, based on things that I used to do. I've actually even put some stories, you know, things that my dad used to do. Some of those are in the book, especially in the early books that I did. Like my dad came to pick me up once, and he had an allotment. So he used to go every week. He used to grow vegetables and stuff. And he'd get, you know, horse manure for the allotment sometimes. He once made me sit on a whole, he picked me up from swimming once. And I remember thinking, this is a bit high. You know, there's a blanket. I was sitting on a blanket and I was like, oh, it's very high. And it wasn't until we got home that I realised that he'd made me sit on loads of bags of manure. It was slightly warm as well, which should have been the giveaway. So I think Tom Gates is basically like, it's very similar.
And the last full question is from Eunice, who asks, what is the funniest book you've ever read?
Oh, like, is this for a children's book?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, let's
I mean, Roald Dahl books. I love, you know, the Twits make me laugh a lot. I also really liked, I had a copy of Spike Milligan's Silly Verse for Kids, and some of the poems and the drawings are very simple drawings, are really funny, made me laugh a lot. And when I was younger, somebody gave me a book because I'm dyslexic and terrible at spelling, and it was by William Steig, and it's called The Bad Speller. And it's not a storybook, it's just lots of individual drawings, and it's all written phonetically.
Okay.
So that, I remember that making me laugh a lot. And I loved Asterix books, loved comics, loved Beano. So yeah, lots of books.
This is more of a suggestion than a question, but I couldn't not include it. So the last question is from Ismail, whose question was, please could you write a book called Agent Ismail?
I think you need, that's a great title, and I think you need to do it. I think that's the start of your book, and that you should write your own story and get going on it, don't you, Anna?
I think I would read that.
Yeah, it sounds like a really great title already. So
don't give it to another author. You keep it for yourself.
Exactly. That's the start. This will be the start of your book writing career.
Right, those are big questions from Sydney Stringer Academy.
Great questions. I'm sorry I answered all of them with about 10 different answers, didn't I?
No, it was brilliant. Those were great questions and great answers. And congratulations on 10 years of Tom Gates. And 10 Tremendous Tales is out now. Liz and I are filming this a little bit in advance, but when you're watching it, it will be out.
Oh, right, so it's coming out. This is coming out on the 18th of February. So
okay. So if you're watching this, it's just about to come out.
It's about to come out. So there you go.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Liz.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Bye, everyone.
And the last author segment for this week's episode of the Bookwanderers Club is with the brilliant Helen Rutter, whose debut novel, The Boy Who Made Everyone Laugh, is out now. So Helen has picked out 3 things about where she gets her ideas from and where she got her ideas for this book from, and she's going to tell you all about them.
Hello, my name's Helen Rutter. I am the author of The Boy Who Made Everyone Laugh. I'm so happy to be here as part of the Bookwanderers Club today. So my book is about a little boy called Billy Plimpton who wants to be a comedian. He loves jokes. But he thinks that because he's got a stammer, that's going to stop him. So 3 things that inspired me to write this story. The first thing on the list of things that inspired this book is my son. My son Lenny is just turned 13 and he stammers. And he's always had a stammer for as long as he's been able to talk. And sometimes it comes and goes, and sometimes you wouldn't even notice it was there. And then other times it's been quite strong and has caused him some problems and quite a lot of stress and worry. And people's reactions have been quite mixed about it. He's had some people being quite cruel and then other people being really kind. We've been to speech therapy with it, and we've slowly learned how to deal with it and how to deal with people's reactions, and it's become something that is just one tiny little bit about him. It doesn't dominate him anymore and define him anymore. And I think that all of our experiences with his stammer were the absolute main inspiration for me to write about Billy Plimpton in this story. Watching how Lenny has dealt with the things that it's brought up in his life has been an absolute inspiration. And I think only when we were through the hardest parts did I have enough perspective to be able to see it as a story, and as a story that, you know, needed to be told. And so when I had the idea, I knew quite quickly that this was something that I really, really wanted to write about. The second thing that I am going to show you that inspired parts of this story. This is a microphone, and I have stood on stage many times and spoken into one of these. My husband is a stand-up comedian. I have done stand-up comedy in the past. And so comedy is a big, big, big part of our lives. So I think stand-up comedy has inspired this story quite a lot. From me doing gigs that went terribly, terribly badly, to doing gigs that were amazing and I loved. And watching my husband go on tour and do comedy nights every night of the week, and coming home and telling me about how the good ones were and how the bad ones were, and the feeling that you get when you're on stage, and how vulnerable you make yourself when you're on stage talking to an audience full of people. That really inspired a lot about this story, about how you have to make yourself really vulnerable, and that when you do that, sometimes you can get an amazing feeling at the end of it. The third thing that I'm going to tell you about that inspired this book is music. I've got drumsticks here. My son Lenny is a drummer. My husband's a drummer. I have tried to learn drumming and I can't. But we live in a really musical house. We've got loads and loads of musical instruments. Whether it's the drums or the piano or the guitars or the clarinet, there is always music being played in this house, which is quite surprising because I'm not that musical. So the fact that I've somehow ended up in this musical family is a mystery to me. But yeah, I really wanted to... Billy, in the book, he's a drummer, and beats and rhythms seem quite important to him, and as they have done for my son as well. I think that there's some connection between music and stammering, and there's often, you see stammerers who don't stammer, when they're singing or when they're playing music, and there's some connection there, and I wanted that to run through the book. And so Billy plays the drums, and his teacher, Mr. Osho, who's gorgeous, a really lovely teacher, the kind of teacher that you'd just want to have basically as a child, he's also really musical. And so yeah, that has been a big inspiration for bits of this book as well. So in terms of inspiration for you, I think something that somebody told me that inspired me and kept me going, and I tell myself again and again, was the sentence, don't get it right, get it written. So I think a lot of people, when they're writing, stop themselves and say, it's not good enough, or I need it to be perfect, or I'll just keep thinking about it and then I'll do it later, or I'll do it tomorrow. Now, I always think whenever I'm in that mindset, don't get it right, get it written. Just write something, anything, because then it exists, it's real. You've written something on that piece of paper that didn't exist before. And so whether it's right, whether it's perfect, whether it's whatever it is, it doesn't really matter because it's there and it's real. So that's what I would say. Don't get it right, get it written. Thanks so much for listening. Bye.
Now it's time for the reading roundup, and this is where I just tell you a little bit about some of the other books that are coming out at the moment. This is another of a fairly bumper episode. Lots of books coming out at the beginning of the month. As always, I'm going to do them in order of the author's surname. So if you know the surname of an author that you love, look out for if they have anything new out, and hopefully you can hear a little bit more about some more different kinds of books and find something that you think might be your next favourite book. So first up we have The Ocean Squid Explorers Club by Alex Bell, illustrated by Tomislav Tomic. Set in a distant watery corner of the explorer's kingdom, a submarine engineer Ursula is determined to become an explorer. Next up is The Shark Caller by Zilla Bethel. Set on the shores of Papua New Guinea, this is the story of Blue Wing, who is desperate to become a shark caller, but instead she must befriend infuriating newcomer Maple, who arrives unexpectedly on the island. And there is a hilarious new adventure from the author of Who Let the Gods Out. Vi Spy License to Chill by Maz Evans is about Vi, whose mum is ex-Secret Service and her dad is a retired bad guy. So when they decide to get divorced, Vi has to save her family and the world from evil domination. Proud of Me by Sarah Hager Holt is a story about self-acceptance and the importance of opening up to those closest to you, about Becky and Josh, who are almost twins with two mums and the same anonymous donor dad. Tangle of Spells by Michelle Harrison is a new adventure in the award-winning Pinch of Magic series. What should have been a fresh start for the Widderton sisters is not all as it seems, as the sisters find themselves in a race against time to break a dark magic that has cast a spell over their new village. Murder on the Safari Star by M.G. Landon and Sam Sedman, illustrated by Elisa Pagnelli, is the third Adventures on Train story. Harrison and his Uncle Nat are on the journey of a lifetime aboard the Safari Star, but things get mysterious when a passenger is found dead inside a locked compartment. Swan Song by Jill Lewis is about Dylan, who has been expelled and forced to move to the tiny village in Wales where his granddad lives. But when Grandad invites Dylan out onto his boat to watch the swans return to their winter feeding ground, things begin to change. Opie Jones Talks to Animals by Nat Lutzema, illustrated by Faye Austin, is about 10-year-old Opie Jones, who is very ordinary, so she is very surprised when she is recruited to join the Resistance, a team of superheroes who can read minds. However, it turns out that Opie can't read human minds, she can read animal ones. The Queen's Fall by Ali Sherrick is a Tudor adventure about Cat Sparrow, who is on the road following her sister who has been sent to London. She befriends a young actor along the way and they end up at the palace of Henry VIII and his first wife. Last up for this episode's reading roundup is Luna Ray is Not Alone by Hayley Webster. Luna Ray has moved to a new house and a new school and is having a hard time fitting in. She's sure that the way to solve everything is winning the school baking competition with her mum, but there's a problem. Luna's mum has disappeared. And that is everything for episode 3 of the Bookwanderers Club. I really hope that you have enjoyed watching, that you've got some inspiration and that you've found out about some new books that you might enjoy reading. Thank you so much to Ben and Helen and Liz for taking part. And remember that you can get in touch with me at thebookwanderersclub@gmail.com if you would like to be part of Big Questions. Get your teacher to email me. If you've done any writing inspired by any of the writing prompts, again, I would love to read it. So that's it for now. Look out for episode 4 in 2 weeks and happy book wandering.